everyone. Welcome back.
And welcome back to all of you. Happy Friday. Let's get into this week's headlines.
You can hardly believe this, Julia, but at the start of the pandemic, when protective gear was running low, like masks, right, the FDA actually relaxed their standards and allowed N95 masks to be imported from China.
Now, however, they say that the quality of these masks are inconsistent, and most of them are not approved outside of China.
In fact, more than 3,500 Chinese manufacturers were registered to sell N95 masks in the United States right here without being fully vetted. So now states have a bunch of these unused and unwanted masks, and there's really questions about whether they work or not.
Yeah, because back in March, April, we're like, oh my God, we're so short on everything. Let's just get our hands on whatever we can find right now. And right now, it's not, we're not as desperate. So we're like, maybe they don't really make the cut.
Yeah, and speaking of China, Julia, let's talk about TikTok.
Yeah, we all know President Trump had a real problem with TikTok, and he signed a pair of executive orders banning TikTok and WeChat, which is owned by Tencent, in the U.S. in late September.
Yeah, and the key word in these twin executive orders is transactions. Yeah. But luckily, Microsoft may be coming to the rescue. The president gave the tech giant the okay to buy TikTok. Yay for Gen Z. Yeah,
yay for Gen Z. The thing is, I read through the twin executive orders, and what struck me was, as you said, the word transactions, because the White House never defined what is a transaction, right? If I'm just like a person, I did a dance challenge, I put it on there, that's not a transaction.
And for those of you who don't know what TikTok is, it's these little viral videos that young people use. In fact, Julia and I are out of the age range. It's kids, and there's been concerns that it's compromised because it is owned by a Chinese company. And of course, relations between China and the United States are at an all-time low. And in fact, the app was banned in India. So we're watching closely to see if Microsoft, which, by the way, owns LinkedIn, will go ahead and buy TikTok.
Yeah.
Hopefully, because we're on TikTok. Follow us. Anyway, another app we're watching is Tinder. So for those of you who don't know what Tinder is, you swipe left when you don't like someone, you swipe right when you like someone. It's used for dating. And while everyone has been stuck at home, especially the single folks, the lonely, their dating subscribers have increased a great amount. How much, Julia?
So Tinder added over 120,000 users in April, May, and June, which doesn't sound like a lot. So I'm curious to see how many people sign up for Bumble and the other apps, because collectively I feel people sign up. This one, I don't know. This number doesn't sound too much for me.
So let's say you're a young person, you definitely know what Tinder is and what TikTok is. For those of you who are not young, you're going to see your kids using them. And they might even have Tinder Platinum. So, of course, we live in a market-based society. Yeah. So Tinder Platinum is the highest level of the dating app, and it gives you priority likes, and you can actually see who likes you.
Yeah, I'm not clear what is the difference, because there are already two levels of subscription or paid tiers on Tinder. I think they're called Tinder Gold and Tinder Plus, right? And some of them, they have like priority features, like you can see that this person liked me before I decide to swipe right or left, and other features.
Oh my God.
I don't know what else Tinder Platinum can do.
It's amazing what money can buy you. High-speed access at the airport, Lexus lanes on the expressway, and evidently a better chance at online dating.
I mean, do you think these users, additional users, do you think they were serious or they're just bored?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think people are starting to realize that being single is not an easy task, especially during a pandemic, because especially in big cities, like we're used to seeing our friends and we're used to going to events, and now we have nothing. So if you're at home alone.
Created in July, and I can't believe I'm saying this, unemployment rate fell to just over 10%.
Yeah, and of course there's room to improve, but these are much better than we anticipated, especially since, Julia, the pandemic is still raging in a lot of states. So that's really good news. Almost 2 million jobs is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, it is not. So, as states open up, I hope we see more of that. The unemployment rate, of course, is still dismal. Dismal. And then I do want to point one thing out is the unemployment rate is usually calculated based on how many people are looking for a job. So there are also people, they just gave up unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right? They're just like, oh, it sucks so much, I'm just not going to look. So those people do not factor into the calculation of that. I don't know how much that changed that number, but I would think that is one of the reasons.
It's hard to look at those graphs.
It's hard to look at
those graphs. And it snapped back to where we were during the Great Recession. And for anyone who lived through the Great Recession, which is basically all of us, we know it was terrible. Yeah. So, speaking of money, let's get to our first guess. Let's see. Do we have our first guess? Oh, we don't have our first guess.
This is what happens. Well, let's say, like, David, let me ask you on the previous point then. We have unemployment rate that's still above 10%, but some of the states, just tragically, some things are getting shut down again.
Yeah, but somehow jobs are still being creative.
I mean, I hope they, more as we transition more to like a virtual work environment, more people can, realize, okay, I can work online, even though that's not a possibility I thought of before. So I hope that keeps going just for the sake of everybody.
So our first guest, a lot of us are getting stimulus checks, so let's talk about money. Our first guest is the Chief Marketing Officer of Bank of the West. He's out in California, which we're very jealous of. His name is Ben Stuart. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Hey, Ben. Welcome to the show. Now, a lot of people don't know that when they put their money in a bank account, it just doesn't sit there, right? They don't know where that money actually goes. How can we find out the top places where our banks are directing our savings?
Well, I would definitely look on the websites of most of the banks here, because as you said, 90 cents of every dollar that gets deposited into a bank, whether it's deposited by a consumer or a business, actually goes back out in the world and finances things. And some of those things you might agree with, like maybe a new school or a small business, but some of those things you may not agree with, whether it's an Arctic oil rig or fracking well. So I think it's important to take a look at the company's websites and see not just what they're promising, but what their policies are.
Yeah, so how can we make sure that, our banks are aligned with our values, which really the most powerful thing we have as consumers is really our own money and directing it towards causes that we believe in, which is something that's very important to young people. So besides looking up at the website, how do you know whether your bank is aligned with your values?
You can look at, there's various reports out there. So the Rainforest Action Network actually puts out a report every year called Banking on Climate Change. It's a fossil fuel report card for banks, and I would suggest taking a look at that. It ranks the largest banks in the world on their environmental policy, particularly fossil fuels.
Yeah, a lot of our viewers really care about the environmental impacts that every entity, organization is doing. Say if a person really likes his or her bank because customer service is great, I like my rep, right? But they disagree with how the banks are directing their savings. How can they call up, and make a complaint about it?
Well, I think there's all kinds of channels for customer service at banks, whether it's on social media, whether it's the phone line, or even in your local branch. I think the most important thing people can do is voice that this is important. This is an important issue to them, and they'd like change.
Yeah, and Ben, how about treating their employees well? Because with a lot of high rates of joblessness, the Ellen scandal going on right now over in LA, down south from you, a lot of us are concerned that the people we do business with don't treat their employees well. So how do we know that, for instance, Bank of the West is doing the right thing with their employees, treating, especially their employees who come from historically underrepresented communities well?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at how they're rated. I think, Forbes puts out a list of best employers for women. The Human Rights Campaign issues ratings for LGBT equality and diversity. I think it's important to take a look at those sort of third-party ratings because they tend to do a very good job of evaluating companies for exactly the issues that you outlined.
Yeah, in that case, how do I know for companies in general, not just banks, they are treating women or minorities or LGBT employees in the right way because they are actually doing it, not just for the sake of the Forbes ranking?
Yeah, I think there you can look at all different places. Obviously there's Glassdoor, there's things like that, but I would say the best ways is to talk to a current employee and see how they're faring, and then also take a look at the leadership of a company. We're very proud at Bank of the West to have a female immigrant of color, one of the only females of color running $1 billion bank, and that has a massive impact in terms of how we view diversity and how we champion diversity across the bank.
Well, Ben, leadership matters. I'm so jealous of the greenery behind you. I haven't seen a tree in weeks, but thank you for taking the time. I haven't seen a tree in weeks. There's no trees in Midtown Manhattan. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us, Ben.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Great to have you here, Ben. All right, going along with banking and integrity, I do want to take a moment to talk about credit cards.
Yeah, so the pandemic has caused all sorts of problems for consumers. How many times have you lost something in the mail, spent long hours on hold with call centers, or had to cancel your travel plans?
All the time.
Check, check, check. Even if you can manage to get someone on the phone, that's absolutely no guarantee that your problem will actually be solved.
A lot of time, too. Some say that this is one of the best reasons that you should pay with a credit card. Younger generations have actually, we're afraid of credit cards, citing terrible stories of fraud and massive unpayable debts. Okay, we can sympathize with that. But if you properly use a credit card, it can actually lead to all kinds of benefits.
Yeah, and I put this with an asterisk, pay off your balance at the end of the month. Don't carry a credit card balance. But if you do have a dispute or a chargeback, or let's say, something never arrived that you paid for, right? The credit card company will actually refund you the amount of the charge that you're disputing. Okay, while the matter's under investigation. This isn't a sure thing. You have to do the proper paperwork. You have to make a few calls. But if you do things right, let's say you had an airline ticket and the airline canceled your flight, ask for a chargeback or a dispute. Make a few calls, and you could get that money back into your pocket.
Yeah, sometimes you get that credit almost immediately while you're on the phone with the representative.
I highly recommend doing that if you're having a problem. There's no reason to sit around and wait for it. You don't win every dispute, but it's something that I highly recommend if you have a problem.
Right. I believe, if the dispute is actually, you didn't make it up, that is actually a mistake, then somehow you would have the paperwork to back up that dispute. So I wouldn't even worry about that.
And there's very clear things. Like my barber was telling me I had an airline ticket, the airline canceled, and they haven't given me my money back. At that point, call Chase, Bank of America, Bank of the West, whoever your credit card issuer is, and say, hey, I need my money back.
Yeah.
And, I want to call out someone who has not given me one problem through this pandemic. And obviously, we have some regulatory issues with this company as Amazon. They're accessible, they're responsive. They've never led me to dispute a single thing. In fact, we ordered a cell phone for our staff and they lost it in the mail. And they gave me the money back without even investigating. Yeah. So really, Amazon is a model for every other company and how they should be doing business during this pandemic.
Yeah, Amazon got so big for a reason. And I think one of the reasons it got so big is the excellent customer service.
Yeah,
right? It's very smooth. Every transaction is very smooth, and we have some of us may have problems with it on other fronts, but
sure.
I do think it's service, it's logistics. It is very.
You click on a window and they call you, and it's always from a Seattle number because of course Seattle is where Amazon was founded and it's still based, and it's just so easy, especially working from home, Julia, having to deal with isolation because of quarantine. The last thing we need is problems with the people we do business with.
Yeah, I don't want to be spending 30 minutes on hold with, I'm not going to name the airline, but...
All of them. No. All of them. Even JetBlue, my favorite airline, where I have status, I spent 30 minutes on the phone. And they're trying their best, and I feel bad, but I wish things were different.
I wish things were different. All right, moving on. Next, we have a communications and speaking coach, Neil Gorton. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, a lot of people are going on their first job interview. What should they keep in mind when they're walking in and making that first impression?
One of the things that people who are going on job interviews, and not even their first one, but even more experienced professionals, they tend to forget that their job interview isn't actually about them. Their job interview is actually about the employer and the fact that the hiring manager probably doesn't want to slog through too many interviews. They just want to fill the position. They want to move forward. They want to get their own work done. And so in terms of making a first impression, a really important thing for them to do is to just show up and be present with them and remember that the hiring manager is a person too, and said, nice to meet you, and shake their hand and look them in the eye and all of that. If we're talking about more of a COVID-friendly virtual interview, then looking at the camera and asking a simple question, how are you doing today? And remembering that they're a person too, will really get you started in helping the hiring manager to feel seen and heard as well.
Okay, so Julia, you're an introvert.
Oh, totally. I remember how nervous I was going into my very first job interview, and it was with a very big, company that I
Very
really
fancy office, right?
So in Seattle. So I want to ask for your suggestions. What would you say to someone who isn't a good speaker and gets really nervous talking to new people?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tricky thing, especially for more introverted types who find that new people and even talking to groups of people and whatnot are kind of it'll trip people up in even the best of circumstances. And so it gets a little less tangible sometimes, but one of the things that I find really helps is thinking less about the goals that we have. If we're more introverted, thinking about the goals, I really need to get this job, I really need to make a good impression, all that, and instead thinking about the impact that we have when we're really on our A game. If we're an introvert and we're just given the ability to just go in and do work in an office or at our desk and just be left alone and all that, and we think about the amazing outcomes that we've had for other people, before going into the interview, just remembering it's not so much about that moment, but rather the general impact that you can have on the organization, it will at the very least help you to help settle your nervous system down and realize how valuable of a person you are. And then that will potentially set you up for being able to look them in the eye and say, yeah, you're an amazing person too. We're just here to have a great conversation, and it at least will set you up in the right mindset.
So Neil, one of the things Julia and I know as video people is that the amount of energy that you have to put in to make an impact on video is like 3 times as much. If I were talking to you the way I'm talking to you right now in real life, you would think I was a crazy person. So how do you come out with energy through a screen? Because if you just talk normal on video, you seem like a bore, don't you, Julia?
Like, hey.
Oh yeah, hi. Please give me this job, Neil. Like, I need the money. Like, my bank account's down to nothing.
Yeah,
like,
I don't
can you
want a
just
gap
give me?
on my resume.
Can you give me this opportunity, Neil? How do we stand out on video?
Well, first of all, this might seem like an incredibly obvious thing to say, guys, but there are so many people who, when they're talking on video, they kind of look down at the screen and look at the person and all of that, right? And that just separates us from the other person. And right now I'm talking to the both of you and I'm looking at my camera. I'm not looking at the screen of you guys or anything like that. I'm just looking at the camera, and that will automatically make you a more engaging and compelling person on video than most of the other people, because they're just caught up on what's happening on their screen. So it might be a subtle shift, but it actually makes quite a profound difference and will help an interviewee to set themselves apart. In terms of how to show up as an animated person, I actually feel that you guys being television personalities, there is a difference between that and a private conversation. In that if you're just simply talking to a person in an interview, I feel that being your own personality and all of that, looking at the camera and reacting and just smiling and having a good time with the conversation as your natural personality will actually get you a really long way. And if you did lots of sort of crazy animated stuff and all of that, that could actually be more like, David, what you're talking about is seeming like a crazy person if it's just an intimate conversation one-on-one.
Yeah. Okay, Neil, last thing.
This is a great question. This is my number one question.
We really want to ask you this. A lot of interviewers, they ask about a person's strength and
weaknesses.
Right?
Yep.
What do you say when somebody asks, oh, what's your weakness?
That's absurd. Why do they ask that question?
Yeah, I was annoyed. When I was in my 20s, I was really annoyed by that question too. And my dad sat me down and said, the person who answered that question the best will get the job done. And I agree with that today. And so what I recommend is they've teed you up with your strengths. So we were talking about introverts. Let's say you're an introvert and your weakness is showing up in group conversations as meetings, and you never speak up and you don't really do that sort of thing. And so you might be an introvert and be really good at just focusing on your work and just getting an incredible amount done in a very short amount of time. And so you might